The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone, my name is Kate Sweeney from LiveWell, Colorado, and I will be your moderator for today's webinar. I have a few housekeeping items to go over before we get started. First, we will be recording this webinar and it will be available beginning tomorrow morning on the LiveWell Colorado website. To access the recording, simply visit livewellcolorado.org, click on the LiveWell Commitment tab, click on Research and Publications, and select Webinars. Second, we will have some time for Q&A at the end of the webinar. If possible, please let us know who your question is directed to when you ask it. To ask a question, just simply type into the Questions tab on your on-screen control panel. And now I'd like to introduce our first presenter today, Leslie Levine.
Thank you, Kate. For those who have not met yet, I am the Technical Assistance Coordinator for LiveWell Colorado, and I have the pleasure of working with our 24 LiveWell Colorado communities. And I've been in this role since the beginning of LiveWell Colorado, so I've definitely had an opportunity to see what works and what might be a little challenging and what can lead to some great impacts related to healthy eating and active living. With Farm to School, we see, LiveWell Colorado sees this as a wonderful opportunity to build demand for healthy eating, not only among our youth, but among the community at large. Farm to School definitely has the ability to impact economic development, not only for local agriculture. We're seeing that among restaurants and other institutions that are able to purchase local food. A lot of our LiveWell communities have had gardening efforts and efforts with local farmers for a few years now. And as they've tried to implement Farm to School efforts, I've seen the great results, but I've also seen that this is not a simple process. And I know that our Farm to School leaders in our LiveWell communities would have really benefited from the technical assistance that is now being made available to you all. So I hope you all are able to learn a lot from this webinar on intensive technical assistance workshops, and hopefully we'll build some new experts in your community. Next slide, please. So for today, the objectives for this webinar are to learn about the new work of the Colorado Farm to School Task Force. And you are going to learn a lot about the Farm to School Intensive Technical Assistance Workshop. You'll learn how it can help your Farm to School efforts and really all that is involved throughout the process, from the planning and then how you can actually apply to receive this technical assistance. Next slide, please. So we've got three fabulous speakers today. Kathlene will be our first speaker, and she will talk about the Colorado Farm to School Task Force. Julia Erlbaum from Real Food Colorado will follow Lynn, and she is the guru on the Intensive Technical Assistance Workshop. And lastly, we have Kristin Kirkpatrick from Bellisimo, and she will talk about her experience with Intensive Technical Assistance Workshop. We will have some time at the end for Q&A, so please, as Kate said, send your questions in to us or jot those down as each of the speakers make their presentation. Next slide, please. All right, so I'd like to tell you a little bit more about our fabulous speakers. Julia Erlbaum is the founder and principal consultant of Real Food Colorado. As an entrepreneur at heart, Julia has been grateful for her previous professional experiences spanning more than 20 years in finance, business development and management, multimedia and corporate marketing, branding, and communication. Through an opportunity to work with school districts in marketing a locally grown and processed kid-friendly product, Julia became intrigued by the local food system and started Real Food Colorado, a development organization specializing in local food systems, infrastructure, and programming needs. Real Food Colorado has collaborated with various local food stakeholders, including school districts, producers, and municipalities in developing farm-to-school, farm-to-institution, and healthy community programs, specifically in creating sustainable and effective methods to support the access of healthy, nutritious, and sustainably grown foods to benefit all Coloradans. Next, Kathlene will speak, and she is a senior research associate with the Spark Policy Institute and the lead staff for the Colorado Farm to School Task Force. Lynn has over 25 years of experience in academic and applied public policy research, directing multi-system policy research processes, and facilitating community action projects. She's also the lead researcher for the Sustainable Citizenship Project in New Zealand. She's the past co-chair for the National Advisory Committee of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation's Leadership for Healthy Communities, and recently a panel reviewer for the National Science Foundation IGERT Centers. And last but certainly not least is Kristin Kirkpatrick, and she is the Chief of Wellness Planning for Bellisimo, a real estate development company located in Fort Collins. In her firm's work to connect development to health and food production, Kristin has been working with local stakeholders on farm-to-institution efforts and is the main point of contact for the Fort Collins Intensive Technical Assistance Steering Committee. Next slide, please. All right, Lynn, I will go ahead and hand this off to you.
Thank you, Leslie. Well, welcome everybody. We're really excited to share with you today the work that the task force has been doing, and through two very generous grants from the Colorado Health Foundation and the Gates Family Foundation, the types of work we're able to do and expand over the next 3 years. So with that, let's move on to learning a little bit about the task force. The task force was legislatively mandated in 2010 with Senate Bill 81. It was called the Farm to School Healthy Healthy Kids Act. And it was fortuitous that in that legislation, this task force was given the mandate to do work. A lot of times task forces and advisory councils are given the mandate to come up with recommendations, which are very important. But in addition to recommendations, our task force was given the opportunity to be able to do very pragmatic things. So the types of things that we are able to do and have been doing is to advise farm-to-school pilot projects around the state, to identify, provide, and design training programs for farmers and ranchers and for schools, and that's certainly what the ITA, the Intensive Technical Assistance Workshops, are. To provide assistance to school food services, to help them establish their internal processes, to figure out how they use locally grown produce, advise school districts on farm to school, including their facility and equipment needs that they have to handle fresh produce. We also offer assistance in identifying funding sources because kitchens need to actually have the equipment to be able to wash and chop and put together those healthy meals. And then the last thing that we've been charged with is to develop a statewide farm-to-school data collection plan. And this is actually very critical for us to be able to understand what is happening and how farm-to-school is growing and where the technical assistance can best help in different ways. In the first 2 years, so in 2010 through 2012, the task force accomplished a great deal. They released over a dozen policy and regulatory guidance reports, and these include annual 50-state reviews of farm-to-school and school food legislative trends. We've released a national survey of how states are addressing farm food safety gaps. We had a very big project that was on farm-to-school food safety, and it's created a number of key resources for schools and producers that are very, I would call them very user-friendly and hands-on, both reports that have links to resources as well as interactive Prezi presentations to walk schools and producers through the food safety issues that are so critical for a successful farm-to-school program. We've also launched a one-stop-shop Colorado Farm-to-School website, and this website is every day, and I'm not kidding when I say every day, new things show up on that website. We have audience-specific pages for schools, producers, students, parents, and communities. We also have a peer-to-peer networking and learning hub in it through its blog, event calendar, and Ask an Expert forum. And then finally, we have an extremely exciting product that we've created that we are taking out nationwide, and this is the Farm to School Evaluation Toolkit. And I'm going to talk more about that as one of the intensive technical assistance workshops that we offer communities. The task force has 15 members. We were reauthorized this last year after they went through a sunset review and were recommended to be continued indefinitely. 2 new seats were added. This slide simply shows you that what we have are 4 school food service directors, 3 are K through 12, 1 is a higher education seat, 1 K through 12 principal or teacher, a nonprofit who's involved in farm to school or local food systems. We have 4 critical state agencies that sit on the task force: the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, the Department of Agriculture, the Department of Education, and the Colorado Commission of Higher Education. And then we have 4 critical producer industries, and currently these are the Potato Administration, the Beef Council, the Western Dairy Association, and Fresh Pack Produce. And then we have one producer who is actually involved in selling to schools. And so we have amazing minds and dedication in this task force, and that's one of the great reasons that we've made so much progress. Next. One more thing I wanted to show you about the task force, and there's a lot of detail here, so I don't expect you to truly read this, although if you wanted to download it, you could go to the Farm to School Task Force website and pull this down in a PDF. But the reason I show this to you is because I think that it highlights the very systematic and dedicated way that the task force has approached their mandate and has approached growing the farm to school. Ultimately, what they've created here is what we call their roadmap, and they stick to the roadmap very carefully. In their road mapping process, they identified what was the end of their road, and for them, that is collaborative, sustainable implementation of farm to school statewide. The green boxes on here represent what we call preconditions. In other words, these are kind of like the level of readiness or the infrastructure or policies that need to be in place in order for us to reach that end of the road. And so, for example, we would need, if we really want to have statewide farm to school, we actually have to have a strong local food system supply chain to meet that demand. We can grow all the demand we want with food service directors, but if we don't have the producers actually selling to the schools or capable of selling to the schools, then we're not going to have sustainable farm to school statewide. The red boxes show those efforts, key efforts. There's many more, and we have a long list of them, but on the roadmap, the key efforts of other stakeholders who are meeting some of those preconditions. And then the orange boxes is really the work of the task force for the next couple of years. From the beginning, the task force made a commitment to be a statewide body, and that means that they travel all parts of the state. They felt strongly that being a Denver metro-centric committee would undermine their ability to both understand the challenges of the different areas the state faced, as well as bringing technical assistance to every area. So they hold their quarterly meetings throughout Colorado. So far, we have met in Pueblo, North Conejos, Longmont, Yuma, Los Animas, Montrose, Carbondale, Fort Collins, and Denver. And we have an upcoming quarterly meeting in November that will be down in Alamosa. Beginning in 2013, the task force is now offering what we call the Intensive Technical Assistance Workshop, which of course is the topic of this webinar. Now I'm going to turn this presentation over to Julia Erlbaum with Real Food Colorado, and she will really walk us through this exciting new set of resources we're able to offer the districts.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Leslie and Kate and Wendy for organizing this. Again, my name is Julia Erlbaum, and I work with Lynn, Kathlene, and the rest of the Colorado Farm School Task Force in offering and providing the intensive technical workshops. And Lynn gave a really nice overview. In the next few slides, we're going to share a little bit more in-depth information. Just to give you a little background on where the ITAs, and that's short for the Intensive Technical Assistance, came from. Just want to give you a brief description of the first 2 years of the task force. The first 2 years, task force had expanded a format with their quarterly meetings that included community meetings. that were very successful. These community meetings were limited to a two-way learning session. We would talk to communities about farm to school in general or some specific aspect of it, and then we would hear back from the community about their interests, concerns, opportunities, and challenges in doing farm to school. In each case, these community meetings led to some very targeted next steps. For example, when the task force visited Yuma, they were able to identify markets, including but not limited to schools, that would buy the new specialty crops being grown in northeastern Colorado. When the task force visited Los Animas, one of the identified next steps was to move the food hub concept. And I'm not too sure if everybody here on the webinar is familiar with Fort Lyon, but Fort Lyon was a correctional facility that was recently repurposed, but Fort Lyon actually contains a commercial kitchen and a variety of other infrastructure accoutrements that would be very supportive of having a food hub. Well, with the task force visit, what resulted was actually moving that concept into a phase 1 project being initiated to support that location becoming a regional food hub. However, even with these listening and learning sessions, what we were not able to achieve was really the nitty-gritty nuts and bolts, and that was really about connecting resources to application. And part of the reason why is because it required us to really develop more of the ITA components. And what the intensive technical assistance was identified broadly as a tool and as a resource that school districts and other stakeholders in their communities could apply to their farm-to-school programs. Now, the themes or the forms or the methodology may vary from community to community, but it was actually being able to receive assistance. And those assistance really was to identify the nuts and bolts, whether they were specifically to provide information, whether it was to present best practices, and those best practices could be, for example, small districts approach to farm to schools, or large districts approach to farm to school, or even maybe providing direct access to individuals that have applied farm to school programming. And part of our effort with the ITAs is really to be responsive to each community's specific needs and at their readiness level. Next slide. So some of the other items leading us to why ITAs were needed was because of the last 2 years with the task force. One of the key elements that was learned is that there is absolutely no right or wrong way for farm to school. Farm to school efforts, depending on where you are and what size you are and where your community is, could start from a very basic farm, which is either buying simply one product from a local farmer. It could be through a school garden program, but at the end of the day, it really is designed by the local community. Most communities want support for their efforts, and those supports could be provided through both bringing in field experts, and those field experts could be other food service directors from other school districts throughout the state. They could be policy experts that have been able to help bridge between application to potentially bringing in guidelines and how you might be able to have farm-to-school programs be embedded into school food programming. But at the end of the day, the ITAs are really intended to support those efforts for the community, and we are very keenly aware of the fact that it is really community-driven, and so therefore all the ITAs are focused on where the community is currently and where they want to go next. Next slide. So basically, this is to give everybody an overview of how the ITAs and how the task force works with the community. Is one of the first things that occurs once a community is identified to have the Colorado Farm School Task Force visit their community is we ask our local partner, and we generally start with one organization that has been identified, to identify and begin a local planning committee. And most of the local planning committees begin with a primary local contact who then goes out and identifies other community stakeholders that should be brought in to basically develop with the task force what ITAs are needed. And these ITAs that are identified are really started through a pre-ITA community engagement. If possible, we always like to begin with a face-to-face, but it usually is all over the conference call. All the pre-planning is really designated and moved forward by the local team. Once those ITAs are identified, the task force with Real Food Colorado works with the local planning committee to basically execute the TAs. With every community that the task force visits, we initiate every 3 months from the visit, basically post-ITA follow-ups and interviews. Part of that methodology is to really understand from where the ITA has left the community, how those communities have been able to take their next steps. And for us, it's very important because we do know that with every next step that a community takes, it may lead into identifying additional supports that they would require. Next slide. Some of the ITA themes, just for everybody to be aware of, and I want to stress that these are just a few examples of ITA themes, and keep in mind that these themes, as well as others, are customized depending on our local planning committee, and especially where those local communities have identified where they would like their program to go. And sometimes communities don't always know exactly where they would like to go, but we want to make sure that any ITA is designed around where the local community feels is best to begin. Those ITA themes include the school procurement, and a lot of times we're talking about regulatory and policy components that can be very, very overly cumbersome. We also like to bridge from just farm to school to farm to institutions. That may include other institutional buyers within those communities that would also be interested in local sourcing. School gardens and farms are becoming, well, school gardens have always been a staple when it comes to farm to school, but now there are other projects that are extending beyond just the gardens, and those are basically school-based farms. And then food safety. Food safety is an incredibly hot topic. It bridges a lot of primary concerns that food service buyers face, but also concerns and questions that producers face. Next slide, please. So one of the, just as a highlight, what we wanted to do is introduce one of the more popular ITAs that have come about, and that is the Stakeholder Session. The Stakeholder ITA workshop is designed to proactively engage local and/or regional community stakeholders, really with an effort to share information on two primary levels. The first is the current landscape of the local or regional food and farm-to-school efforts occurring in the community. And we do want to include regional in this conversation because sometimes you have communities that really are encompassing a geographical area. The second primary level is sharing best practices and other efforts occurring throughout the state. Farm-to-school doesn't happen in an isolated bubble. We can learn from each other, and if we could share those resources, the learning and application process is more successful. The end result of the Stakeholder Session is really to develop an interactive session with the local community. And with that interactive session, what we want to walk away with is that the local community can develop a work plan. And the work plan is developed through a facilitated discussion consisting of two components. And those two components really are the small roundtable discussions, and those small roundtable discussions are where they're small groups that identify 4 critical areas. And those four critical areas include identifying local food and farm-to-school barriers, local communities' immediate next steps, what are their long-term goals for their farm-to-school efforts, and what are the resources that they would need in order to move those goals forward. Then the smaller groups regroup together to basically share their findings. And a lot of times with sharing it together is that the community self-identifies what are those common links that bridge those smaller groups together. And by doing that, what they're really doing is the community is self-identifying their needs, the value, and the impact, and other factors that would go into moving their farm-to-school efforts. This then comprehensively starts to work into developing their work plan. This tool can be of great assistance not only for the local community, but for the task force as well. A major objective of the task force is to share critical information to all Colorado communities, but also be an emissary on behalf of those communities when it comes to bridging the gap between current and future efforts supporting local food and farm-to-school programs. Next slide, please. So with the community farm-to-school work plan, this is a work plan that came out of the Roaring Fork visit that just occurred this year. And as you can see, it basically identifies the key topics that came out of the discussion. This was all designed by the communities themselves, and they prioritized really under those categories what those key areas were. And with the resources needed, some of those resources were actually, we were able to immediately connect them with some of those resources, and others are obviously long-term resources. This is also the document that the task force will be checking in with Roaring Fork community every 3 months to identify within this work plan where they have been successful and where they may need additional resources. Next slide.
Thank you, Julia. So this is Lynn again, and I'm going to jump in because one of the other ITA sessions that we bring to the community, and we bring that to all of the communities, is on the evaluation toolkit. This is one of the major products of the task force, and this ITA session is intended to be able to train the community and other interested participants, school food service directors, teachers, garden leaders, whomever is interested and doing farm-to-school activities, how they can track, collect the data, evaluate it, and why they should. So the types of reasons you would want to do an evaluation include that you're looking for ways to identify program improvement. In other words, you want to see how you can improve your program overall, or maybe very specific components of your program, including improving the process or the outcomes of a program. You might want to do evaluation for other stakeholders. Sometimes this is a really great way to build the momentum and the excitement to really ramp up your efforts when you can share information with your parents, with your school leaders, with your administrators, your school board, other community members, to show them what you're doing and how this is so important to the variety of different things, healthy eating, learning behaviors, information that shows that the students are very involved and excited about understanding their food system and growing food and so on. And then you might need it because you have information is needed for your funders. Oftentimes, you will get a grant, and it could be a large or a small grant, but that grantor is going to want some evidence that their grant was well used and differences were made. And this toolkit will walk you through and help you be able to collect the data that your grantor would need. The toolkit is composed of a guide that walks you through the 6 steps of evaluation, as are shown on this particular slide. And then it also has several other components. One component is a Word document that you can type in and fill out right there with a group of people. You might want a small planning committee to work on this. And this is really your evaluation plan. Now, that might be like, well, I don't even know where to start. Well, you do know where to start because as the next slide shows you, we also have a lot of what we call attachments of resources. And so this one is an example of an attachment for measuring food service outcomes. And as you can see, this matrix provides a lot of information. I'm going to walk you just through a little bit of it so you can understand while there's a lot of information here, it's actually very conversational and it's very easy to wrap your head around. On the far left, you will see that the target is there that is talking about what you want to measure. In this case, you'll see it says the food service staff. This first column talks about outcomes, and this is really identifying the type of outcome you may be interested in. And in this case, the very first one is to increase your knowledge of seasonal recipes. The second column helps you decide if this outcome makes sense. And really, this is the kind of like, I don't know, which outcome am I looking for? Well, this would be your program includes changes to the school meal program, specifically tied to seasonal offerings. You might look at actually this column first to try and decide which ones of these are you really looking for. And if you say, yeah, that's the one, we just started putting in place new menus and menus that are tied to Colorado products, we really want to understand this, then you say, you know what, this is one of the outcomes we want to measure. And on this, and what makes this such an easy and friendly tool is that you don't have to come up with the measurement tool. Rather, we have gone through every measurement tool that is out there to date, and we have hyperlinks to all of them. We tell you exactly where that tool is. You can download it, and we also have a section that tells you how you would use that tool if you need to adapt it. So we give you guidance on how you adapt. This workshop is a really hands-on workshop that gets you started on creating that evaluation plan and really gives you a high level of comfort level in doing evaluation. I would add the one other thing that comes with attending that evaluation workshop is that we will provide additional hands-on technical assistance as you continue on your evaluation. So I want to wrap up here really by talking about the long-term goals of all of this. The task force is really looking to be able to map the farm-to-school landscape in Colorado. And the way that we can do that is multiple layers, but part of it is that we want to be able to really tell the story of farm to school, and we can do that through our Farm to School Information Hub. We can do it through webinars. We have farm to school champions that we've identified and we do interviews with and we tell their story. There's a lot of different ways to get the word out. The reason for getting the word out is because really I think the most powerful way to figure out how you learn what you want to do and what you can do is by seeing what others are doing. And so this is a really great way to share your stories and share your successes and share your hiccups because we can learn from each other what things were challenging and figure out together how we can do it better. The intensive technical assistance workshops serve as a tool to identify the various models of farm-to-school programming that are out there. As Julia talked about, farm-to-school comes in all different shapes and sizes, and how you start it and what goals you reach for first and later is really, really community specific. And there are so many different ways to do wonderful farm-to-school programs. And so we're there to support those multiple ways that that happens, to bring those resources, that whatever it is that you need to do that, and then to connect the various programs that are happening around the state. I think one of the most exciting things for many communities is to find out what's happening, say, in Weld County or down in Durango, or what did they do up in Yuma? Really, they have some, you know, what are they growing up there and how did they make that work? And so it's very exciting to be able to see that they start in different places and yet they're all moving forward on their farm-to-school efforts. And then ultimately, Colorado really does want to become a national model of farm-to-school. And I have to tell you, we went from a state that was doing some wonderful grassroots farm-to-school efforts to a state now that is known nationally. We get calls every week from different organizations around the nation. We are very involved with the National Farm-to-School Network. And we love that Colorado is really setting the stage for a very collaborative way to grow community-based farm-to-school. And now I'll turn it over to Kristin Kirkpatrick.
Thanks, Lynn. My name is Kristin Kirkpatrick, and I work for a local development company in Fort Collins. And we've been lucky enough to be working with Lynn and Julia over the past few months for intensive technical assistance. I will say that our timing was really unfortunate, and our kickoff event happened to be when we had all of that flooding. So our first stakeholder meeting was actually underwater when we were supposed to have it. So we were kind of unsuccessful, but we plan to reschedule, and we've done a lot of really great work. And we've felt really honored to be part of this process and to be a recipient of the intensive technical assistance that Lynn and Julia are providing. If you'd go to the next slide, please. So in Larimer County, we felt like we were ready for intensive technical assistance for a variety of ways. One, our local school district, Poudre School District in Fort Collins, had just completed an external food audit and had a lot of great feedback about how to alter their process and make some improvements to get more local food involved. We have also, as a community, been through a really extensive process talking about the formation of a local food cluster through our City of Fort Collins Office of Economic Development. And so our community had been engaging stakeholders across the board and talking a lot about local food. We definitely have a really big consumer base and a consumer drive to see more local food supported in a variety of ways, in local policies and certainly in our local school district. We had also been working with Lynn and Julia. Obviously, they're amazing resources and brilliant in a number of ways. And we've been working with Lynn and Julia in the development that I'm working on, talking a lot about local food hubs and some of our barriers for infrastructure for looking at our whole food system. And so we have been spending all this time talking about it and had identified some barriers, but didn't necessarily have the expertise in our community to be able to get to the next step. We had a desire to get there. We've been engaging the stakeholders. We've been identifying what we need, but we didn't necessarily have the tools that we needed to get there. So we thought that the intensive technical assistance might be a catalyst, that they could help us take those conversations, dig into the specifics, and really get to where we want to go. Our community felt like we're doing some really great things in a lot of ways, and so we weren't really at that basic level of farm to school, that we needed something a little bit more specific to us. We're not an agricultural producing county like Weld, our neighbor. We're more urban in our nature, and we just have some unique needs and some unique barriers. And so we were really excited and felt like the ITA was what was going to fit the bill. Next slide, please. So the first thing we did was engage a steering committee. And the tip I would have for other communities is that you might want to talk with that steering committee a lot before you engage with Lynn and Julia. I think we spent a lot of our first meetings with Lynn and Julia really talking about things that our community probably already should have decided. And so for our steering committee, we engaged folks from our local hospital. We had local farmers, local food advocates, Colorado State University, who's of course here in Fort Collins. We had multiple departments in our local government, a lot of parents, members of local businesses, including a local food distribution company, and then the local developer that I work for, and of course several members from our local school district. They included their nutrition department, their district-wide wellness coordinator, and their district food buyer. We engaged that steering committee and we worked with Lynn and Julia to identify our goals and what we would like to accomplish. Given the fact that we had been doing a lot of conversations through our external food audit at our school district and also in the process to form a food cluster, we were really feeling like a lot of the conversations that had been held were held at the policy and sort of organizational level. So one of the things that our steering committee had felt really strongly about was engaging our community in what Julia had called a stakeholder session. So that first community meeting was really intended to share all the great things that are going on. We anticipated that a lot of general public members probably didn't know that we had been discussing forming a food cluster. In economic development terms, that's kind of wonky and very specific to our local government. And we also anticipated that a lot of members of our community didn't know about the external food audit and probably didn't know all of the wonderful things that our school district has been doing. And so we really wanted an opportunity to share what was going on and sort of the plethora of things that are going on. And then secondly, to get feedback. We really wanted to get community member feedback to help drive our intensive technical assistance. Our steering committee had brainstormed a number of things that we felt like would be really beneficial to us. And we were able to categorize those in ways that sort of lumped themselves naturally into buckets for intensive technical assistance. But we definitely felt like we wanted to meet our community where they're at as well, and felt like that initial stakeholder event was really important. Our audience for that was general community members, and we piggybacked on top of a local event that was happening here anyway called the Sustainable Living Fair. The Sustainable Living Fair is an annual event and has a really big local food focus, and so we thought that it would be a really natural fit for engaging our community in that way. As I said earlier, unfortunately, the day of our event was when we had our big flood, and our Poudre River swelled and overexceeded its banks, and the specific location that we were supposed to be talking at was underwater during the event, but we will reschedule and we will be making that happen in the future. The second stage that we had identified was taking the feedback from that community kickoff, that stakeholder session, and then taking that on top of what our steering committee had already identified and brainstormed, using the conversations that we've had in that external food audit and through our food cluster process. We had talked about strategies for increasing the produce that actually gets into our schools. We have a lot of great things happening in our school district, and our school district really feels like they're buying as much local produce as they possibly can. And so we wanted to look at some really new and novel and really innovative techniques like Denver's, where they have contract growing, and they're contracting with farmers to get local produce into their schools. We also felt like we had done some really great work around local gardens in our schools. In school gardens, we've got some great policies to make sure that they're successful, but that we felt like we could probably dig in a little further and really explore what makes for a successful school garden and how to optimally utilize them for the goals of getting more farm-to-school efforts. And then the other thing that we were really excited about, and so glad that Julia and Lynn bring to every community, is the evaluation component. We felt like evaluation is often missing, or it's done inconsistently across efforts, and we have really neat community collaborations happening. So we've got nonprofits doing work with schools, we've got community members doing work with schools, we've got schools across our district doing really neat things individually. And so we were really interested in getting on the same page from an evaluation standpoint, both because we think it's beneficial for seeking future grants. It's also beneficial for us to better understand what we're doing well and where we have room for improvement. So those were the main things that we were really excited about in the ITA process. And unfortunately, our weather hasn't cooperated, so we weren't able to share today how those things presented an outcome in our community. But hopefully we will hear in the next few months. The things that I would say if you're interested as a community in intensive technical assistance would be to really spend some time thinking about who your stakeholders are, who you need to have on board, and then fleshing through with your community what your goals are and what you think you're looking for. I think that we could have saved Lynn and Julia probably a lot of time if we had been more on the same page in our own community, and we just needed to have those conversations, and this was a great reason to do so. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over.
Great. Thank you so much, Kristin. And I have to say that Julie and I are so lucky to be able to work with communities and people like Kristin and the planning committees. It's so exciting to see what is happening and the energy and motivation that people have to really push this forward, which leads me to now talk about how we are in the process of identifying sites for our 2014 and 2015 intensive technical assistance workshops. And this particular map actually is really just showing you the growth of farm to school. It's not where we've been doing ITAs yet, but rather shows the growth of farm to school between 2010 and 2012. The dark green counties are where farm to school was happening in 2010, and that was 22 school districts. We're doing some type of farm to school or a school within a school district. And it could have been a very simple once-a-year thing, or it could have been a harvest of the month. It could be much more extensive. That's one of the things about the statewide data collection that we're really pushing forward to, is to better understand just what does farm to school look like and where is everybody on that road that they're doing. You can see the light green are those that were added in 2011, and then the orange are the counties that started doing something, the counties that have school districts that were starting to do something in 2012. Or actually, this is a school district map, that if you're getting confused on the counties. Those aren't counties, those are school districts. Of course, what we want is ultimately every single one of those districts would not be white. They would be a color because they are doing some type of farm to school, and that's what these intensive technical assistance workshops are all about. So why do we need you? We need you because we want to grow farm to school, and we want to grow it in the way that your community needs it to be grown. We want to learn and document and develop the resources that will make farm to school work in every part of the state of Colorado. And we want to share and promote those resources in Colorado, of course, and also we're hoping that, as I said before, that Colorado becomes an amazing national model, and farm to school is happening all across the nation, and that we can be part of making that happen. Each community that we visit provides us with invaluable information because they are unique, and we've talked about that before. But I also want to say that at the end of the day, where we're really looking to do is that farm to school becomes the norm in food procurement, not the alternative. It's a nice thing to do, harvest of the month, or or some school event. But it's what the first thing that food service directors do, and it's the first thing that the local producers want to do is sell to those schools. So we have a way for you to tell us you're interested. We would love to have you apply, and you can see that this is online at the Colorado Farm to School website. You can go straight to it with that link that will be on this PowerPoint, which you'll be able to pull down probably tomorrow after the webinar. Or you can just go to the Colorado Farm to School website, and if you click under the task force button at the top on the menu, you will see ITA workshops, and just click on that and you will find the link to apply for it. The one thing I would like to mention is don't be afraid to apply. The main thing is not where you're at on farm to school, but rather how much interest is there in farm to school. So you might be doing quite a bit and you want to really ramp up your efforts, you're a great candidate. Or maybe you haven't started at all, but you have had conversations with multiple people in multiple organizations, and you know that there's a lot of energy and desire. You're a great candidate. So please do apply.
Thank you so much to Lynn and Julia and Kristin for those wonderful presentations. We would love to open it up for Q&A now. Just a reminder, please submit your questions to the questions box on your on-screen control panel. And please indicate which speaker you would like to answer your question. That would be very helpful. And as we wait for some questions to come in, our speaker contacts are going to be available. And like I said earlier in the presentation, the webinar is being recorded and will be available on the LiveWell Colorado website. To access the webinar, simply visit livewellcolorado.org, click on LiveWell's Commitment tab, click on Research and Publications, and select Webinars. There, the webinar will be recorded and you can watch it, as well as a PDF version of this PowerPoint presentation. Also, the Food Systems Toolbox on the LiveWell Colorado website is another great resource. We have all these resources available for you, so I would definitely encourage you to visit and check out all of those. So it looks like we received a technical assistance question, and the Apply Here button doesn't seem to be working on the ITA page of the Farm to School website. I'm sure they will get on top of that and make sure that that is working as soon as possible.
Yes, thank you so much. I checked it yesterday and it was working yesterday, so I will go immediately after this webinar and make sure that that is not having a problem. So thank you for pointing that out. Great. We'd love to have you apply. We're really looking forward to it, Chris. This is exciting. Thank you.
I would really encourage you to ask any sort of questions you may have, obviously from the most simple to a very specific question. Our presenters are here right now, available for you, and are eager to answer any questions you may have. So we'll wait just a couple more minutes.
So I would just to keep some noise going here, I would mention that, you know, in our experience so far, and the ITAs are brand new this year, we are learning a tremendous amount from each community that we're engaging with, and it's giving us and creating more and more resources as we move forward. And we are also learning that, you know, it doesn't matter if your basic farm-to-school program is largely situated around school gardens at this point, or if you've got all these different things happening, like Kristin described up in Larimer around the food system and all the energy that's going there. There are so many different ways that we can help you really think through and imagine what that farm-to-school program can look like and the steps that you need to get there, and then to provide you the resources to be able to make that happen. And one more thing I would say is that none of this would be possible if it weren't for, I would say, three things. The Colorado Farm-to-School Task Force and their incredible work that they did in the first 2 years, and ability to really identify how this hands-on technical assistance is so terribly needed, and that they needed to do much more than go in and do listening sessions and put resources up on the website. All really great stuff, but we heard loud and clear from the communities that so much more was needed.
So it looks like we received a question, and it's, are there other regions that are trying to bring in multiple school districts together? This specific person would like to do a watershed approach, which would be 3 different school districts.
Yeah, hi Chris, absolutely. And in fact, there are, it's really actually quite typical for the smaller school districts to be doing a multiple district approach. And so in southwest Colorado, there are many, there are about 5 districts right now that are going together to do multiple bids, or a cooperative bid down there. That up in northern Colorado, really through Weld, Greeley, Evans district, they have put together a cooperative bid. And I'm mentioning both of those because those have been a really effective way to really create, for a small district, to create enough of demand for the product that the supply then from the producers, that the producers can see a benefit to them in being able to sell in a larger quantity, which helps bring down the price points which schools need. So when you're a really small district and you're buying a small amount, it often is very hard for the producers to make ends meet on their end because it's not enough. And so multiple school districts and a watershed approach is a wonderful way to do it. So you would also like to know if there are potential grants to start the process. So at least as it goes for doing the technical assistance, we come in, and this does not cost a community any money at all. we can absolutely work with you. If that is one of the things that you feel is necessary to really make it happen in your area, then that would be one of the things we would work with the planning committee to determine if there was a technical assistance around how you find the grants and secure the grants. We actually have on the Farm to School Task Force website a grant toolkit. If you go under Grants tab, you will find under the sub one, Resources, and there is a grant toolkit. Now that grant toolkit is largely for identifying equipment and kitchen infrastructure, but it gives you a sense of the ways that you can begin to more effectively figure out what grants are a best fit for you, as well as identifies a whole lot of grants out there that are more than just about equipment. But those are one of the things we can definitely do to help you.
So we received another question, and it is, how are you gathering the data about the number of school gardens, etc., to put on your map?
So that's a great question. The data right now, because we do not have a statewide method of learning about what's going on, although we are in the process of working on that, all of that information has come through a variety of different sources. I am sure that we do not know about all the school gardens. So sometimes we learn because we have done in the past, in 2010, we did do a food service directors survey statewide and learned about districts that had school gardens. We've learned about school gardens because we've heard about them when we have been out and about, or we've had different schools or districts contact us and tell us about them. It's the same way, honestly, that we have learned about other kinds of farm-to-school efforts, which has been just multiple ways. If you go to our map, so if you click on the map that is on the website, it will pull up a Google map, and on that Google map, you will see how it was that we identified a particular district. So it gives the data source that told us that some type of farm-to-school was happening.
And it looks like we have time for just one last question, and that is, how do you get teacher and cafeteria worker buy-in to use the limited school time for education with children?
Julia, would you like to talk about that?
Sure. I think the question is really about engaging the different players that can work together to not only provide access to healthy food options, but provide the education as to why these healthy food options are important. We have in one of the ITAs, actually with the Roaring Fork community, because there was a very big effort in incorporating their school garden into actual curriculum. And so one of the things that we had done with our visit is work with a local partner in Roaring Fork and produced an ITA session which brought in both teachers as well as other stakeholders to understand the value of school gardens as a component to be utilized in basically the regular curriculum that is part of the school education program. So they actually had set up stations where teachers were able to go through these different stations to understand how school gardens could apply, for example, to science, how school gardens could apply to other educational components that could be incorporated into their lesson plans. So that's one of the things that the ITA has done. I think the broader question is really about bringing in the various stakeholders, whether you're a teacher, whether you're an administrator, whether you're a food service professional, or even just a parent or a community activist, into that larger discussion of what local food really means, what farm to school means, and how you can actually be part of the process. And that process really can incorporate many different levels, but it has to begin with actually opening the door so that people know that they're invited to join in the conversation.
Thank you, Julia.
And I would just add, Chris had mentioned that the application button was not working, but she just said that she discovered it was her pop-up blocker on her computer that was preventing it. So if you click on that Apply Here button and it's not working, check your settings. Thank you, Chris, for troubleshooting that.
So in addition to the speaker contacts with their email addresses and the Food Systems Toolbox on the LiveWell Colorado website, we also have a number of other resources for you to follow up with and check out after the webinar. I strongly encourage you to go to each website because they all have really valuable information. And then we would just like to thank you for tuning in to our webinar today. Please join us for next month's webinar. It's on healthy food distribution, sustaining profits for farmers while providing more accessible healthy foods for all consumers, and that will be on the 14th of next month. I would like to reiterate that the webinar is being recorded and will be available on the LiveWell Colorado website. And also, please look out for a follow-up email tomorrow. It will have all of this information along with a brief survey that we would greatly appreciate your feedback on our webinar. So have a great day, and thank you again for joining us.